Crushing evolution theory is fun and easy. For 50 pages of it, visit Debunking Evolution. Here are top creationist arguments. There are two parts to evolution. Microevolution is variation, and macroevolution is morphing from one kind of creature to another. Microevolution is quite real, but it is just variation, such as the different breeds of dogs. Macroevolution, on the other hand, is just a mental fantasy. It cannot happen. When talking to the public, evolutionists talk microevolution. That's how they sucker everybody into believing the rest of it. All their experiments deal with variation and adaptation, though they try to pass a few off as macroevolution. But every creature has limits to how much it can change. To morph beyond the limits, mutations in DNA would be needed to provide novel genes and epigenetic RNA. Living things are intricate biological machines of mind-boggling sophistication. Mutations in their codes cause problems. If you are typing and hit the wrong key, the message is confused. You know that a mutation in your computer would damage it. Lots of mutations would destroy it. An evolutionist believes it just might improve it. For evolutionists, mutation is not only important, it's all they've got. Invention by accident. Accident piled on accident to create all the elaborate biological machines that ever were. Evolutionists like to call it the law, not theory of evolution, the very foundation of biology, that made every type of plant and animal that ever was, one morphing from another, all based on mutations beyond the limit of variation. It would take many constructive mutations to make just one new part and integrate it into an animal over a very long time. Unfortunately for the theory of evolution, while there are cases of parts disappearing from animals, no new parts have ever been detected under construction in any of the millions of plants and animals in the world. Yet if evolution is ongoing, there should be thousands. Just show some to the world and the battle with creationists would be over. But in 150 years, they got nothing. For macroevolution to happen, there would have to be a natural force that invents and builds, but there isn't one. There is the opposite, a tendency to disintegrate. It is called, yes, the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of entropy, which is a measure of disorder. It reads, "A natural process always takes place in such a direction as to cause an increase in the entropy or disorder of the system plus the environment." In the case of an isolated system, it is the entropy of the system that tends to increase. When they hear that, evolutionists immediately say, that only applies to closed systems and biological creatures are open systems, as if they know what they are talking about. Since most people know nothing about this, the discussion is over. Here is the reality. The second law is defined in terms of an isolated system for the sake of simplicity, but there are no isolated systems in nature. It applies to every situation, all systems. This is from the textbook Biological Thermodynamics, Cambridge University Press. Most scientists consider the second law of thermodynamics the most universal governor of natural activity that has ever been revealed by scientific study. The second law says that no natural process can occur unless it is accompanied by an increase in the entropy of the universe. The second law demands ever-increasing disorder. Evolution theory claims to build complex life forms, but how can there be a process in which life forms become increasingly complex where the second law operates, which is everywhere? There can't. Here is an expert on thermodynamics. Ilya Prigogine co-founded the Center for Thermodynamics and Statistical Mechanics in Austin in 1967. That year he also returned to Belgium, where he became director of the Center for Statistical Mechanics and Thermodynamics. For his study in irreversible thermodynamics, he received the Rumford Medal in 1976 and in 1977 the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. He made it clear that the chance of molecules assembling themselves together to create life forms is vanishingly small. Vanishingly small is how scientists say impossible. He wrote, The idea of spontaneous genesis of life in its present form is therefore highly improbable, even on the scale of billions of years. Ilya Prigogine co-authored a paper in 1972 that says essentially, in an open system, crystals can assemble themselves, but unfortunately this principle cannot explain the formation of biological structures. All the second law is saying is that entropy, like time, moves in one direction. Time moves from present to future, the natural world moves from concentration to diffusion, from order to disorder. To counter this natural trend and accomplish work, mechanical, electronic, and biological machines are needed, but they have to be created by an intelligent creator, man or God. In 1859, the great scientist Louis Pasteur settled the question of whether life can arise spontaneously from chemicals. His experiments showed that life only comes from life by reproduction. It was the same year Darwin's book on the origin of species was published, and of course evolution requires that life on Earth began by assembling spontaneously from chemicals. Without the spontaneous generation of life from chemicals, evolution could never begin. Most evolutionists refuse to talk about this at all. These days, scientists speculate that RNA, not DNA, was key to the origin of life. But RNA is difficult even for biochemists to make outside of a living cell. It falls apart easily and its abilities are limited. RNA is not such a good candidate for the origin of life. In 1953, Miller and Urey became famous with an experiment that made a few types of the building blocks of proteins, amino acids. No doubt your science teachers made a big deal of this, leaving you with the impression that it was the first step in the glorious discovery of how life arose from chemicals. They probably didn't mention that the search has been a failure. As veteran origin of life research biochemist Robert Shapiro put it, the origin of life field has been short on progress over the past half-century. In fact, the futile struggles of origin of life researchers over the last 60 years have virtually proved that it is impossible for evolution to get started. To recap, there are two completely different parts to evolution theory. Microevolution is just variation, like breeds of dogs, and macroevolution is the mental fantasy that one type of creature morphs into a different type of creature. The second law of thermodynamics prevents morphing, the spontaneous appearance of new types of molecules, cells, tissues, networks, etc. that form novel creatures. Left to themselves, objects and chemicals cannot organize into these machines, so macroevolution is physically impossible. If something is physically impossible, it doesn't matter how much time passes, it is still impossible. Origin of life research over the last 60 years has confirmed what Louis Pasteur established by scientific experiment, that life could never arise spontaneously from chemicals and evolution could not begin. End of story. It leaves only one possibility, that all living things on Earth came from an extraordinarily powerful living intelligence who designed and created life and great beauty. Hey, I'm just saying.